Mr. Godbole.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, thanks a lot for calling me and inviting me to address you. You know, it's a very prestigious institute, and I'm very honored to be speaking to the staff and students of this institute. In fact, many years ago, I was teaching fundamentals of computer science at NMIMS. But that's like several years ago. So many of you may not even know this. But first of all, let me just make one clarification. Give one clarification. This is I'm not going to talk about a lot about how our economy is disrupted because of Corona and so on. I think we all know about this. We all see this all around us. There are ways to to come out of this, and I can probably touch upon that towards the end. But what I want to talk about is, in fact, the current status of our economy. And I think more, a lot is talked about these days about India being a superpower and so on and so forth. I want to burst that myth. And if somebody is looking for some kind of positivity, then you will not probably like this session. I must first of all warn you, because I love India. I love Indian youth. I certainly want to see India progress enormously, tremendously on the world scene, and whatever I'm going to show you right now is in fact how where we are in comparison with the world. And I think it is very important, especially for the students, to realize, because this is not what is covered normally in the papers or normally in the media and TV debates and so on and so forth. But I have actually, compiled a lot of data which is reliable and which is, very authentic. You can get most of this data on the internet and produced by organizations which are very reliable. So that's the first thing that I want to say. Second thing is, I'm certainly going to tell you that we are not in a good shape, and one of the reasons is that we've neglected our social architecture, or what I call as social infrastructure, which is education, healthcare, electricity, water, roads, to the last mile, to the villages, and to just about everywhere. And that's what, in fact, most of the countries who advanced, including Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, of course, Europe and America, and most of the governments actually spent huge amount of money doing that in previous years, which is why they actually could grow so rapidly in the subsequent years and could produce so many scientists and could, that is one of the fundamental reasons why they could progress. And we're neglecting that, and I really feel very, very bad about this. So I would request you to not take this negatively, but in fact, I urge all of you to consider and think about what we need to do so that India really becomes a superpower. By superpower, I don't mean how many tanks you have and how many planes you have and so on and so forth. I define superpower as a country where the growth and prosperity reaches the bottommost of the population, last mile. I don't want 30-40 crores of Indians sleeping hungry every day. I mean, that's a shame to our country. And I think that's something that I want to bring home today, and it might hit hard. And I want to pre-warn you that I want to talk about what is the status of current society. Next, please. Next slide. So I have said to say that everything is good is not positivity. These days there's a fashion to talk about positivity, and that would be lying. It's a false positivity to show fault lines and to show what the real situation is and what we need to do about it, especially for the people at the bottom. That's, I think, being positive. Next, please. I just want to say that I'm not against globalization because I'll be referring to that quite often. But I don't agree with Swadeshi Jagran Manch in the sense that I don't agree to the philosophy that we should stop all the imports and exports. That would be disastrous. But what we accepted after 1991 was not balanced. In fact, anybody who's interested in reading about globalization should read Making Globalization Work by Stiglitz, who's obviously all of you must know that he's a Nobel Prize winner, and I like him a lot. He has written a lot about inequality and financial crises and so on, but his book about making globalization work is very important. Let me just tell you what the difference between the globalization that we accepted and China accepted. And before I do that, let me just tell you why globalization actually came into existence in the world, because most of you may not know, the students especially. You see, in 1970, the decade of 1970s, I won't go into the history of, because that'll take a long time and I can probably talk for hours on that. But in the decade of 1970s saw the profits of the corporates in America and Europe declining. And when the profits go down, there are two ways in which you can actually increase the profits. One is decrease the cost of production and increase your sales or marketing. And they wanted to do that in one shot, kill two birds in one, as we say. And that was what globalization was all about. So what they did was they actually diverted their manufacturing to China and services like information technology, banking and other stuff to India. How did they kill two birds in one? One is that they acquired cheap labor force. If I give you a software example in software industry, a software programmer, American industry had to, or corporate had to pay a software programmer $100 per hour. They could hire an Indian programmer for $60 or $50 an hour on site if I sent somebody to America, or $25 an hour if it is offshore center, right? And I have actually in my career sent thousands of people to America. So I've actually spent 32 years in this industry. So I know exactly how that happens. But since $50 to $60 on site or $25 to $30 offshore was far less than $100 per hour, which they had to pay to the American programmer, they could ship a lot of software work to India. But you must understand that $30 an hour, $25 an hour was also much higher for an Indian engineer than what he or she could do, she could get before this whole IT revolution or globalization and all that started. So it was win-win for both. I mean, it created a middle class in India, also China, and crores of people in India, 20, 30 crore of people. The middle class was created. So their living standard improved. Okay. But in American terms, they got cheap labor, because if they had to spend $100, they could spend only $25 to $30. It was actually beneficial for both. And this newly created middle class in both India and China was their market. So that's where they actually sold their cars and, General Motors and Ford, and they sold their mobiles and sold their TVs and whatnot. I mean, the entire washing machines and so etc. So I think they created a market. And also they got the cheap labor. So cost of production went down, and they also could sell their products at a profitable rate. So they killed both in one go. So I think globalization had some good impact. That is, it created a middle class or higher middle class of 20, 30 crore. But we must remember our country is 135 crore people. And remaining 100 crore people did not get the benefit of globalization, at least the way it should have. I mean, I'm not saying that they did not get anything at all, but certainly the trickle down that was expected to happen did not happen. I think that is the fundamental reason why I have an enormous amount of disagreement with the way we have implemented globalization. I'll give you one example. What Chinese did, and I'm very critical about China, by the way, in terms of the lack of democracy, enormous amount of inequality, also climate crisis and several things. But China also has a great example for us. What they did was in 1980s, they spent huge amount of money on education. In fact, they have been spending money on education from 1949 onwards. But in 1980s, they spent huge amount of money on education, which is why they created, also healthcare, by the way, and which is why they could create a healthy and learned and educated working class, which is also why they could become a manufacturing factory of the world. They deliberately chose that. Please understand the whole sequence. When several manufacturers came to China, they entered into the agreement with them, and when they said we can provide you cheap labor, but you must transfer technology to us. This whole idea about Chinese have stolen the technology from the West is, is more or less bogus. In a couple of cases, they may have done that. But like Apple, for instance, had an agreement with them that when they created a factory, they they had an agreement that they could transfer the technology. And this is what happened with many companies. And what they did was what Japan did in 1970s, what we call as reverse engineering. They studied that technology and bettered it in subsequent years. So much so that China today is leader, far, far higher, better than America in AI and in data science and in the 5G technology, and even, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, just to tell you, I won't go into China because that's a very long subject. But I must tell you, it's so amazing today, the kind of cities and roads and everything that they have created. 97% of the villages, all very concrete, very beautiful roads are connected. The electricity and education, healthcare, and the social infrastructure is tremendous. I mean, that's the reason why China could grow. I must also tell you that Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Europe, America, all the government spent huge amount of money. Please understand, the government spent huge amount of money on these before the corporates actually built their companies. And I think we are neglecting that, and I really feel very sorry that we are doing this. Anyway, just to end this, China, for instance, recently built a 10-storied building, and you know what time did it take for them to build a 10-storied building? Normally, we would assume that it'll take 1 year, 2 years. I mean, we see buildings sort of coming up floor by floor and variety of things happening. And in a year's time, you see a 10-storied building being created in India. I'm sure you must have. We all see that every day. Please understand that Chinese created a 10-storied building in 28 hours. And I think the news, you can go to Google and find out. I mean, what the pace at which they're going ahead is miraculous. I mean, there are several things I can talk about China, though I hate many things in China, by the way, and we are at war with them. So I mean, I'm not certainly saying that their model is something which is good and we should adopt that. I'm not saying that at all. But the way they adopted their globalization, their import-export duties, and the way they dealt with globalization was far different than India. And I think that's why we are sort of caught in one kind of trap. Our globalization was corporate globalization, which actually helped only the top 1%, 2%, maybe 10%. Or maybe if you include the middle class a little bit, maybe 20, 30%, which is like 20, 30 crores. But the remaining 100 crores people did not were not benefited. Just to give you an idea, before I move to the next slide, I have several slides. I'll probably go through them very fast later on. But to give you this idea, in India, in my opinion, there are 100 crore people who are about poverty line, not above, just about poverty line or below poverty line. Why? If 80 crore, you have to give 5 kg of grains to 80 crore of people every day for them to survive. That doesn't reach 80 crores anyway. It's only 48%, etc. We won't go into that statistics. But if you have to give 80 crore people 5 kg of grain every day for them to sustain, what does it show? Also, this 80 crore number is not very correct because this was according to the 2011 census, according to Niti Aayog. And 9.5 crores have to be added according to Niti Aayog, which essentially makes it 89.5 crores. And in Corona, in the crisis, 23 crore people have been pushed into poverty line. So if you add all that, it'll probably become 110, 100 whatever crores. But let's assume that around 100 crore people are just about living every day. I mean, they may not be hungry people, maybe 20, 30 crores. Really hungry people going to bed every day, but maybe 30 crore people in India. But just about sort of surviving maybe 100 crores. I mean, that's the kind of thing that we are witnessing. We have to realize where we are. And I think, next please. What we have done is we have counted only GDP as a measure of growth. We have not counted on many other indices, which I'll actually go through, which is why financialization increased, which essentially means that only share market started being counted as a measure of progress. Share market has nothing to do with the real economy. As we know, the real economy is in doldrums. And by the way, let me just make it very clear that when I'm criticizing the way we have adopted globalization, it is both Congress and BJP and all the governments. I'm not necessarily against a particular government. Otherwise, people today, if you speak about anything, people immediately start thinking in binary terms. I'm talking about a system, and in fact, system globally, whether it's US, UK, whatever. And what I call as neoliberal system, which essentially says that government should do the least and everything should be done by the private. This is this neoliberal system that I'm talking about. And I think that has created a havoc. Whether it is this party or that, this country or that also doesn't matter, because this system or the way of thinking is ruling over the whole world today. I think that's what I'm talking about. It's not Congress or BJP or Samajwadi Party or whatever. I'm not interested in that. But so basically, I'm talking about a system. And it started from 1990 onwards. In fact, in 80 onwards in America itself, giving GDP enormous amount of importance and share market enormous amount of importance. So inequality increased obscenely. I mean, I don't know if I have the slide for that or not, but 1% of India, according to the latest statistic, and you will be shocked to know that 1% of Indians own more than four times the wealth of lowest 70%. Please understand, 1% owns more than four times the lowermost 70% of Indians. I mean, that's obscene. So, so what has happened is trickle up instead of trickle down. Unemployment and underemployment has increased. It has always been hovering around 6%, 7%, 8%, but now it is like 12%, and in youth it is 20, 25%, etc. after COVID, as we know. This environmental degradation, I won't talk about it. As we know, 9 out of 10 worst polluted cities in India, in the world, are Indian. And in Delhi, you can see even 2 feet away. And no, I don't need to talk about this. I think we have all droughts and all the things that are happening in the natural world today are basically because of climate change, and we need to be aware of that. And that is why is this happening? This is because of this GDP growth. We continuously want to produce more, use more, and throw more. Use huge amount of mobiles, create an enormous amount of e-waste and general waste, and throw it in the water and pollute rivers, and use fertilizers, pollute land, do mining and pollute air, etc. So I won't go into that, but essentially, if production and GDP and that too, basically consumerist goods, the cosmetics and fast food and all that kind of stuff, and TVs, and if that is what is pushing your GDP, then that will create huge amount of automation, which will reduce employment and create a environmental degradation. So I think it's our developmental model and paradigm that is very important, and that is pushed by the neoliberal philosophy of maximizing profits and at the cost of the poor, at the cost of environment, and the cost of equality, and so on. I think that's where the whole thing is going to. Next, please. Now, I won't go into that. The official, our GDP, even if you assume GDP as a measure of development, then GDP growth has been declining since 2016. Actually, once it was 8%, but in 2016 it became 4%. Arvind Subramanian, who was essentially the advisor to the government, said that it is actually 1.5% because GDP measurement, the series based on which we used to measure GDP has been changed. So it is not 4%, it is actually 1.5%. Arun Kumar, who is a very well-known economist in Delhi, says it should be 0% or minus. I'm talking about 2016, by the way, before COVID. That is because unorganized sector was completely decimated after demonetization, and we are not taking into account the destruction of unorganized sector. It accounted for 45% of GDP, and therefore the actual GDP is not even 1.5%, as Arvind Subramanian says. It should be actually minus. So we can go into, so when the last quarter, if you must have noticed that we said it, the minus 23.9% was the GDP in the last financial year's first quarter. Arun Kumar says it was minus 75%. Again, not because we are neglecting the impact on unorganized sector. So there, next please. I'm leaving these slides here, so even if I move fast, those who want to study it later should certainly study it and maybe even check those figures on internet and ponder deeply about where we are. I think 26 people in the world have, this is inequality, wealth more than 26 people, by the way, people, not person. 26 people in the world have more wealth than bottom 50% of the world. Wealth in India is more than 70% below N24. Even the United States, the bottom 50% of people have same or lower real income, maybe inflation adjusted income in the last 30-40 years. So what globalization has done is in the last 50% lower half of American people, their real income inflation adjusted. If your income increases by 10%, but prices also increase by 10%, the real income has not changed. So inflation adjusted income of the lowermost 50% of people in the last 30-40 years has remained same or lower. Now, as I've said, in India, about 100 crores near or below poverty line. Next, please. Now, Indian government should, now, what is our situation of healthcare? We neglected healthcare, education, electricity, water. As I don't know, I have slide on that, but around 48% of the people don't have fresh tap water, healthy tap water. And so on and so forth. I have used statistics about where we are today, and later on I'll compare ourselves with the rest of the world. And I think that's where it's an eye opener. So I would certainly request you to really study this and see whether we are anywhere near Mahasatta or whatever. Now, Indian government should spend at least 5% of GDP on healthcare according to WHO, at least 3% by in fact many experts. How much did we spend in 1985, which is when Congress was there? 1.3%. 2004, 4 and 5. Actually, I have not mentioned 2004-5. Some percentage is missing there. Maybe it's a mistake. 2005, 0.75%. It's a shame. 0.75. We should be spending 5%, by the way. 2005, we spent 0.75% of our GDP on healthcare. 2018. It was less than 1.3%. 2020, it was 1.2%. But defense was 2.1%. And only half might reach due to corruption, by the way. In 1990 to 2008, expenditure of affluent countries on healthcare increased from 5% to 7%. And our healthcare expenditure is 0.9 to 1.2%. Please understand. That's why our public health is in doldrums. I mean, I have some statistics. Next, please. Indian government spends $16 per capita per year. That is per head. Government. American government spends $4,802 and British government spends $3,500 per capita per year. 2018 healthcare expenditure as percentage of GDP spent by countries. This is public plus private. As I've said, if you take only public expenditure, that is government expenditure, we are 0.9 to 1%. Now, public plus private, if you take into account, Sweden is 9.2%, America is 8.5%, France 8.7%, UK 7.9%, Denmark 8.7%, Italy 6.7%, Switzerland 8.5%. So now take BRICS countries. BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, as you know. South Africa 4.24%, Russia, these are the latest figures. Russia 3.89%, Brazil 9.5%, China 6.64%, India around 3.6%. Now, why are we lowest just about everywhere? Next, please. In the list of countries spending on healthcare, India ranks 171st out of 175 countries. Now, is it, I mean, In India, 73% of total health expenses are borne by individuals, rest provided by the government. So only 27% is the government and 73% borne by the individuals. And obviously, poor people can't afford it. You can't imagine the 50% of the people in villages and small towns just sort of to bear the pain. They can't afford to go to the hospital. Can you believe what kind of situation we are in? In most of the countries, 80% expenses are borne by the government and 20% by individuals. Next, please. Now, here's some statistics. Doctors per 10,000. In India, there are 8, Sri Lanka 11, China 20, other countries 25 to 30, 3 times more. Hospital beds per 10,000, India 5, China and other countries 25 to 30. That is 6 times more. Consultants per 1 lakh, India 0.3, America 12.4, Norway 26.64, and there are many other countries which are much higher than us. Psychiatrist patient to doctor ratio, India is 1 to 70,000, 65,000. We require actually at least double, 50 to 100% more is required. Next, please. We have sub-centers and PHCs, as you know, only 38% have capable staff and medicines. Only 20% have telephone facility. Only 30% don't have any. 30% don't have any bed in the hospital. Only, and they have a standard by the government itself as a standard laid down as to what could be called as an ideal. Is there a bed? Is there an oxygen? Is there a ventilator? Is there an ICU? Is there a nurse? Is there whatever? And using that criterion or criteria, they rate only 11% have passed that test. 11% have passed their own standards. So you see cancer patients on floor and 2 new mothers on same bed and so on. Kerala was the only one who tried successfully due to good healthcare facilities. I mean, in Kerala also because of people coming from abroad, the numbers are increasing, but the basic infrastructure is very good. And also there are a few other small pockets, but generally in India the situation is extremely worrisome. Next, please. Many of these hospitals face shortage of water and electric supply. According to 216 survey, there is a shortage of, but this is a little repetition. Next, please. Healthcare is getting expensive day by day. 74% of doctors in urban area serve 28% of population, and private sector 58% of hospitals and 81% of doctors. So the 5-star hospitals are increasing. Many diseases, including mental problems, obesity, heart problems, diabetes, are increasing. But there is no increase in hospitals to tackle these problems, psychologists and patient ratios. And in rural areas, it is very bad. Next. Now, education is another story. There are 5-star educational institutes, but the government schools are very poor, which is where our lowermost 70-80% of the people have to go. They can't afford to pay huge amount of money to enter into the private educational institutes. But what is the status there? Please understand, why am I saying this? China, South Korea, Japan, Europe spend huge amount of money on all schools. Please understand, all schools. They gave rise to private schools and institutes later on, but initially they made sure that each one is educated. What is the situation here? 42% of schools didn't have a compound. 45% of schools didn't have a separate room for headmaster. 40% schools didn't have electricity. 13% schools didn't have sufficient water supply. 18% schools didn't have a library. 95% schools didn't have a librarian. 40% schools didn't have a playground. And we want Sachin Tendulkar everywhere. For 72% schools did not have a computer. Out of the remaining 14% were not working. This is the status. Only 9.5% had internet connections. Only 9.5% had internet connection. Next, please. 70 to 72% schools didn't have laboratories. We want scientists here. They did not have laboratories. Around 47% schools did not have clean toilets, washed toilets. About 44% schools did not have toilets for girls. How will girls go to the schools? Around 1 lakh primary schools had only one room, whereas many schools did not have rooms at all. Around 75% schools were studentless. Many students had maximum 20 students or less in number because they had to walk miles to get to the school. There are many reasons, and I may have to speak for hours on each point, but we have to sort of cover a lot of areas. Next, please. What is the condition of education in India? 52% of 5th standard students were not able to read 2nd standard textbooks. 49% of 5th standard students were not able to read second two-digit math. 49% of 5th standard students were not able to do two-digit math. 54.7% teachers have no teach, look, or they have to teach or look after far more students, more than 100, etc. Next, please. Now, this is the most important. Why is this happening? Government should spend 6% of GDP according to Kothari Commission, and since then, just about every expert has said this. But in 2012-13, even in the earlier government, we spent 3.1%. 17-18, the percentage fell to 2.7%. The economic survey in 31st January 2007, this is according to the economic survey. Now in 2020, it was planned at 6%, and I really welcome this move, but we still are hovering around 3%. We have not moved to more than 3%, or nearing 6%. We should go to 6%, but it's not just the quantity of money, it's the quality also, it's the quality of education. But that's a long subject. How do other countries spend? Brazil spends 5.8%. We spend 2.8 to 3%. Brazil spends 5.8% of GDP on education. South Africa 6%. America 5.4%. UK 6.4%. All countries spend 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7. We spend 2.8 to 3%. I mean, I don't know what to even say. Next, please. Why do we lag behind scientific research? Research stops as student gets doctorate degree. Actually, in America, research starts when you start doctorate degree. We have astrologers, our culture has superstitions and science. Inequality, about 40 to 50% students' brains don't develop properly due to malnutrition and poverty. For the malnutrition is around 40% in India. How can brains develop? Because brain develops in the first 5 years. So you have Einsteins actually in the hotels who are just sort of doing utensils and being waiters or etc. I mean, this is, you can imagine the kind of waste. 40 to 50% of the children, the brains cannot develop. Only 1% of GDP is reserved for scientific research in India. China spends 1.9%, America 2.75%, and many other countries, Israel, Europe, etc., Japan, much more. How can you get scientists and research papers and patents? Next, please. Many of our students don't know what is a laboratory. 72% of schools cannot afford a laboratory. I'm not talking about a handful of private schools and institutes. Now let's assume, therefore, the number of scientists per 10 lakh population. You must know that there has not been a Nobel Prize in India for the last century, for 100 years after C.V. Raman. All the people who got Nobel Prize, the Indians who have been living abroad. Number of scientists per 1 million, that is 10 lakh. America and Britain 79, Russia 58, China 18, Brazil 14, Chile 7, Kenya 6, but India 4. Please understand this. India is 4. This is official statistics. You go to net and find out. Next, please. Number of patents per 1 million population. Number of patents. America 910, Germany 2288, Japan 3716, South Korea 4451, China 541, Brazil 34, India 17. Next, please. Now let me just go through some indicators where we are. And so by the way, you'll probably think that I'm a great critic of India. I'm not. That's why I started with the whole thing that what is being positive? To understand where we are and what we need to do, rather than just thumping our chests as India being a superpower and that kind of absolute nonsense. I mean, look at where we are today. I mean, is this a superpower? Well, how do our lowermost 70-80% of the population live? This is what concerns me, and I think so. If they can live properly with good shelter, however small it is, maybe one room kitchen, but they don't go hungry. They have education, they have healthcare, they have job, they have a small house, they have electricity, they have clean water, and there's public transportation for all. If that is what happens, I'll call India as a superpower, and not, this kind of, I mean, really, I wouldn't say shabby, but I mean, I don't even know what word to use. Now, all these numbers are absolutely official, collected from very reputed institutes. You can go to internet to find out. There's one thing, commitment to reducing inequality, called a CRI index. Out of 158 countries, one is good, by the way. India, out of 158 countries, India is 129. Pakistan also is better than us, 128. Bangladesh is better than us, 113. Nepal is 112. Afghanistan 102. Sri Lanka is 94. And of course, Europe, Japan, and Southeast Asia is far, far better than us. Next, please. In the case of workers' rights, security, contracts, working hours, pensions, out of 158 countries, again, one is better. India is 151 out of 158. Pakistan is 116, Bangladesh is 109, Nepal is 130. I've deliberately taken these. Obviously, Europe, America, and most of the other countries are better. Nepal, Bhutan is 141, Afghanistan 113, Sri Lanka is 86. Next, please. In many states in India, working hours have increased from 8 to 12. There is no contract for 71% of the workers. 54% of the people do not have paid leave. And there are maternity leave is not there for women. I mean, I can list another 5. So the entire status, if you go to, any other European countries, any Japan, South Korea, any nation who calls itself humane, the condition is far, far, far better. Next, please. Ranking of the government provision of public services such as education, healthcare, pension, etc. in 158 countries, one is better, obviously, best, frankly. India is 141 out of 158 countries. Nepal is 120, Bhutan is 124, Sri Lanka is 106. Only Pakistan, Afghanistan is behind us. In this, we are better than Pakistan and Afghanistan. But Far East, Europe, Singapore, and America, better means far, far better than us. Next, please. Oxfam index of how much tax system helps reduce inequality. One is the worst. One is the worst. So India is 19. Pakistan is 71, better than India. Bangladesh is 32, which is better than India. Bhutan is 130, which is better than India. Sri Lanka 91, which is better than India. And of course, most of the other countries are better than India. Next, please. GDP per capita. Now, people say our GDP may be low today. In fact, minus 23 point, minus 8 to 10%. As you know, today we are very hard hit very badly because of Corona. We say, don't look at GDP. What is the GDP per capita? That is important. So GDP per capita is India is $2191 per year. Sri Lanka is 3830, Iraq is 4630, Libya is 3671, Nigeria 2431, Iran, and all the BRICS countries are many times more than India. There is Bangladesh, Russia, China, etc. And advanced countries are 20 to 30 times higher. Okay. Now there's a third argument that only GDP per capita is not important. GDP per capita, PPP, is important, purchasing power parity, which means that I have, like, for instance, I have $2191 per annum in India, but out of, with $2191 in India, I can buy so many things. But in America, because prices are high, that, $2191 in America obviously is different. So in America, if it is, let's say, $6,000, and in India it is only $2,000, they may still be able to buy the same thing. The same, if you include the basket of refrigerator, fan, vegetables, whatever the basket is. In America, it will require far higher money because the prices are high. So that's what is called a PPP. So if you sort of equate that, if you by price difference, it is called as GDP per capita, PPP. Next, please. So GDP per capita, PPP, if you say, then India is $7,333. if I've compared BRICS countries, Russia is $29,485. China is 18. China has gone much beyond this. This is old by the way. $18,931. Brazil is $15,643. South Africa $12,442. This is a few years ago. I think Chinese figure at least, because China today is at least 5 times India's GDP per capita. So BRICS is 2 to 4 times. Japan, Korea, Singapore, etc. far higher. You must know that China and India started with at 1980 on the same GDP, but populations are very similar, as you know. So GDP per capita also was similar. Same GDP, same per capita. Today China is 5.5 times higher than India. Next. Press Freedom Index. Now, I don't need to speak about that right now because a lot is going on. But Press Freedom Index, out of 180 countries, India in 2016 was 133. In 2021, it has moved to 141. One is good, so 141, which is very bad, out of 180 countries. Scandinavia and Europe is 1 to 30. South Africa is 32. England, America is 33, 34. South Korea, Taiwan is 42, 43. Nepal, Sri Lanka is 106 to 127. Brazil is 101. Pakistan, of course, is only lower one. We are 142. Pakistan is 145. So we are better than Pakistan, just marginally. But I think look at what we are being compared to. I mean, this is next, please. Democracy Index. Economist, as you know, Economist is a very reputed Economist Intelligence Unit. Out of 167 countries, one is the best. So India in 2014 was 27. Now it is 51. Sorry, 2019 it was 51 and now it is 53. So we've gone from 27 to 51 to 53. We have deteriorated a lot. You must understand that we now stand with Sri Lanka and USA as defective democracy according to economists, EIU as it is called. Scandinavia and Europe are full democracies. Bangladesh, Pakistan is hybrid democracy, which is worse than ourselves. That is defective democracy. And Afghanistan, China and so on are dictatorship, which are the worst. So there are levels, and the best is Scandinavia and Europe, which has full democracy. After that, there is the defective democracy, India, USA, Sri Lanka. Then the third is hybrid democracy, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and then there is dictatorship. So we are number in the second bracket, but not very good condition. Next, please. Corruption Perception Index of 2020 out of 175 countries. Number 1 is best. It gives in 2 categories, number and percentage. Let's look at only number. Number 1 is very good. Now our number is 87 out of 175 countries. Europe, Japan, and Hong Kong is 1 to 20. USA, France, UAE is 21 to 30. Spain, Portugal, South Korea is 31 to 40. South Africa is 69, and so on and so forth. Brazil is 95. Brazil is worse, but we are 87. So, and our percentage is 40%. As I said, if you look at the header, 0% is best. So we are 40%. Europe, Japan, Hong Kong, and all the rest is better than us. So we have a lot to do there. Next, please. Global Terrorism Index to 2020 out of 163 countries, 0 is the best, 10 is the worst. Now India is 7.351. Afghanistan obviously the worst, 9.542. Iraq is obviously worse, 8.682. These are countries which are worse than us. Iraq, Afghanistan, Nigeria and Syria. But barring these 4 or 5 countries, India is worse than most of the other countries in Southeast Asia, Europe and so on. I mean, BRICS countries and Southeast Asia and Europe and America and so on and so forth. So this obviously they count the terrorist incidents and so on and so forth. Next. Next, please. Global Terrorism Index. Earlier one we had said we have India is 7 point something. South Africa is 5.82, USA 4.22, Middle East 3.95, Sub-Saharan Africa 2.53, Asia Pacific 2. Etc. Central America, Russia. Next, please. So we are very bad. Next. Now, Global Hunger Index. Global Hunger Index, one is the best. We are 94th in 117. That tells us how hungry we are, hungry Indian people are. And I've given the rest of the indices. I don't need to read them. Almost all are better. All advanced nations. Even Sri Lanka is 64. Pakistan is 88. Bangladesh is better than us, 75. Myanmar is 78. But we are 94, by the way. South Africa in BRICS countries, South Africa is 59, Russia is 18, China in Brazil are less than 17, by the way. They're far better. Environmental Protection Index, one is best. It takes into account air, water pollution, etc. In 180 countries, we are 168. Brazil is 55, Russia 58, China 120. So I've divided in BRICS countries, the neighboring countries and advanced countries, 3 columns. Neighboring countries, Bangladesh is 162, very close to us. Pakistan is 142, Sri Lanka is 109. All advanced countries are less than 20. Then Congo is less than 158, to Iraq is etc. etc. So we have to do a lot about environment. Next, please. Human Development Index takes into account education, health, etc. Where out of 189 countries, where our number is 131. And there again, BRICS countries, Brazil is 75, Russia 50, China 90, South Africa 116, all better than us. Sri Lanka 72, Bangladesh 133, which is worse. Myanmar 154, worse. Pakistan 154, worse than us. And all Scandinavian, Far Eastern, Europe and America is far better than us. Then World Happiness Index, one is best. We are 144th in 149. China is 84, Brazil is 35, Russia is 76. As we know, Bhutan is the one who actually started this whole happiness movement. Neighboring countries, Bangladesh is 101, Pakistan 105, Sri Lanka 129, but we are 144. Finland is the best. Finland is 1. United States is 19. And there's a huge amount of list that if you go to net, you'll find that list. Next, please. And this is not an international, some kind of all countries of spying, all countries sort of working against India and produced these reports or whatever. I mean, they have no interest in doing that. Please understand. Then quality and accessibility of healthcare index. We are out of 195 countries, we're 145. China is 48. Sri Lanka is 71, Bangladesh 133, Bhutan 134, Pakistan 154. Pakistan is worse than us. We are 145, but Pakistan is 154. But all the other countries, Europe, as the usuals, are far better. Then gender gap index, the man-woman, equality. In India, the number out of 156 countries, 140th. One is the best, but we are the worst, 140. China is 107, Russia 18, 81, Brazil 93, Sri Lanka 116, Pakistan 153. Pakistan worse, obviously. Afghanistan is the worst, 156. In fact, out of 156 countries, Afghanistan is 156th number, which is the worst. They mistreat the women, as we know. Pakistan is 153, which is bad enough. But look at us. We are 140. Iceland is obviously number 1. Finland and US, etc. is 30, and all the rest are 20, 30, 40, etc. But we are 140. Next, please. Global Peace Index. How many riots take place? How many murders? All that. Number of India out of 163, number is 139. Brazil 126, better than India. China 104 is better than India. Russia 154, worse than India. Europe, America, all the rest are far better. So excepting Russia, I think we are far better, far worse in global peace index. Then innovation index. How innovative are we? Out of 60 countries, our number is 48. Again, one is the best. So we are not innovative. And I've given you the reasons. How many people do research and, how many scientists per million, how many patents per million. I've told you, because basically the education itself is so terrible. I mean, most 70-80% of the people are pushed into wretched kind of educational system. So how can you produce scientists, and we spend even 1% on research, all the rest spend 2%, 3%. So I mean, Far Eastern countries obviously are 1 to 20. Brazil is 46, which is just below us, but better than India. Russia is 24, better. China is less than 20. China, the innovation is speeding up enormously. Let me just tell you, in economics terms, normally you move from agriculture to industry to services. What we did was we directly moved from agriculture to services, IT and so on and so forth. Thanks to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, we had IITs and IIMs and many engineering colleges, and therefore we were engineers ready to take up software jobs and move to IT. But we did not have the mass of people educated and healthy workers to get manufacturing here, which is why we missed the boat and China took it up. What China did thereafter is used, as I've said, the knowledge of the technologies of globalization, which they did not steal, barring maybe one or two cases. And there have been, Trump has started a great campaign against China. I mean, I have a lot of things against China, by the way, but this is ridiculous. China did not steal. China had a great foresight in approaching globalization. So basically what they did was they actually adopted that technology, sometimes copied it, sometimes re-engineered it, and then bettered it. And today, I must tell you, in AI, in tomorrow's industries, in Industry 4.0, AI, even satellites and space programs. I mean, they're far ahead than India. I mean, we are nowhere, absolutely nowhere in any technology, in drones and any technology, because we have no basic research. I mean, we need, 30, 40 TIFRs and IITs and Institute of Sciences and CSIRs and so on. Many institutes are needed. I mean, but we don't spend enough. Our education system does not allow 50, 60, 70% of our population to even grow in terms of taking higher education. We don't spend too much on R&D. And the whole idea is to take and borrow from the West. I mean, even software. I mean, I really feel so sorry that even in software we don't have a single product which can rule the world. I mean, we're very happy to, Microsoft, SAP, and Oracle. We call ourselves IT superpower, but we don't have a single software product which can rule the world, and we can proudly say this is a software product and the whole world is using it. Even Israel can say, look at this spyware, whether good, bad, whatever. Why could India not produce a product which will counter it? I mean, we are an IT superpower. So the whole idea is, because in our culture and in the last 20, 30 years, we're used to, you give me what to do and I'll code it and send it to you. And unfortunately, I've been in the IT industry for 32 years. I have seen it very closely. I know that in a few companies, there is some R&D going on. There is some product development going on, but it's very minuscule. We still use products built by the Americans and Europeans, and we're happy doing that. And we don't have products of our own, leave alone high-tech products and so on and so forth. So I think, I'm just giving you some information about software where I have some experience, but that is true about the rest as well. I mean, we don't have too many companies producing, like chip manufacturing. After Americans put the embargo, Chinese now are producing chips which are far better and far higher numbers. I mean, and that's the reason Americans are worried. The whole reason why Trump started the whole China war was because at one time they used to look down upon China as a younger brother whom we used to just help them grow and so on. But the way they moved in the last 10, 20 years is so phenomenal that I think America today feels threatened. And that's why this whole Cold War is being talked about. So we must know what is the basis for this. There are many things in China which we must criticize, but that's a separate topic. But we must also understand where we are and see what we can do about this, rather than just sort of smashing Chinese TVs and doing some stupid things. I mean, I think it's much better to look inwards and think about how we can better our research, how we can better our education, healthcare, roads, electricity, water, the cheap, inexpensive housing for all and public transportation. If we do that for all the population, and for the next 20 years, we'll emerge as a country which will, start really giving a good fight, because then we'll produce educated, healthy workers, scientists, and so on and so forth. Today, it's only a minority, and they also are very servile. I mean, they look up to West to just provide them some products that they can use. And I think that's not the kind of I don't call that as a big progress. Next, please. Ease of doing business is the red tapeism and hundreds of other things. Out of 190, one is the best. However, out of 190, 63. So we're not so bad there. Russia is 28, which is much better. China is 31, which is far better. South Africa is 84, which is worse than us. Brazil 124, which is far worse than us. But Europe, America, and Eastern again is far better. Then multidimensional poverty index. It is not only income, but it measures a lot of things. There we are 62 out of 110, and I've given the numbers. You can study later. Next, please. Sustainable Development Index. We are out of 193 countries, we are 107, 17. Russia 57, South Africa 110, which are better. Bangladesh 109 is better. Pakistan 134, which is worse. Vietnam 49 and Iraq, which is better. Southeast Asian countries and so on are far better, as we know. Next, please. Look, let's look at, actually, just go to the next. If you look at debts, quite a few times we see our debts are far lower than America and all that kind of stuff. We always compare with America, Italy, and Europe. But if you compare with the Far Eastern countries, we are the worst. And Kaushik Basu, who was our advisor to the economic advisor to the Prime Minister for many years, who now actually is a Columbia professor. He had given an interview and he had given some figures. So I checked the figures, and those are June 7, 2021. So those, now they need to be updated. But it's not, there are two things that are important. Debts are not important. Debts per million is important. That is and we should not compare only with America and Europe, but we should compare with our equivalent people with similar climate and similar kind of thing. So death per million in India was 231. Please understand. Pakistan was 92. Sri Lanka was 40. This is not what our TV channels tell us. Our official figures tell us. Numbers in BRICS countries: Pakistan 92, Sri Lanka 43, Thailand 8.4, China 3.2. Taiwan, number of other countries: Japan 91, South Korea, should be S Korea. South Korea is 37, Cambodia 9.5, Vietnam 0.37. Please understand. Taiwan is 0.50. Taiwan is 0.50. Hong Kong is 28, and Singapore is 5.3, and India is 231 per million. So this is, this is only countries which are less, which are mortal, or the countries which are where mortality rate is more than 100 per million. Indonesia is 176, Philippines 173, and Malaysia 104. But even those are far, far lower than India, which was 231. We are one of the highest, by the way, in per million deaths. And this is what we don't tell our people. Apart from the fact that the number of deaths actually are 10 times more as being discussed today, that we don't reveal the actual numbers. The actual number is far higher, but that's another story. But even the official numbers, we don't compare apples with apples. We compare with America, and we compare with Italy, and we compare with England, maybe Brazil, because those are the countries which have mismanaged the entire COVID pandemic. And then we say how better we are. I think we shouldn't be doing that. Next, please. Now, what happened after COVID? This was the subject which we had started with, but I wanted to give you the full background as to where we are. I think it is very important. I'm sure we all must be feeling quite shattered, because when I found these numbers out, I was shattered. I still am shattered. And it is not from a negative perspective. It is from a positive perspective. Now, what happened after COVID? These are the last 3-4 slides and I'll end my talk, after which we can probably have some question answers. 5,000 per month proportion of rural households earning less than 5,000 per month. I think some words are misplaced there. Proportion of rural households earning less than 5,000 rupees per month. Please understand. Less households are not individual. The entire family earning less than 5,000 rupees is 75%. Proportion of rural households earning less than 10,000 rupees is 93%. There is one survey called RCRC, it's according to that. Then Aziz Premji University, which is called APU, the proportion of people who have become poor due to COVID is 97%. The average monthly income of household in India is declining and today it stands at household stands at 8333. Less than 5,000 is 75%, but the average is 8333 because there are enormous inequalities. So there are some people who have huge amount of income. Decrease in average monthly income of households in India, according to National Statistical NSO official. So monthly income decrease on the average is 1,010 rupees. Rising unemployment rate, according to CMIE, because the government does not publish it any longer, CMIE gives the data of unemployment, which is 12 to 14.73%, and average is around 12 to 13%, which is very high because 4 to 6% is something that we are used to living with, but it's now 12 to 13%. Rising youth unemployment is 25 to 30%. The number of jobs lost between January and May is 2 crores. Job loss in 2020 was 12.6 crores and jobs gained was 9 crores. So, the migrants went back and then they came, etc. 12.6 crores jobs were lost, not just migrants, but even white collar. Out of which 9 crores came back later on. So there was a loss of 3.6 crores. But the difference was the people who came back, there 9 crore jobs which came back, they came back in the category of unorganized sector. So they did not came back in organized sector with fixed and known income, with contracts, with provident fund, with pension, paid leave and so on. So they came back as unorganized sector. So the situation actually worsened. Next, please. The proportion of people who lost total income completely is 27% in COVID. They lost that income became zero is 27% of people, by the way. The proportion of people who lost half their income is 24% according to Aziz Premji University. Poverty rate in rural areas after pandemic is 15%. Poverty rate in the city after pandemic is 20%. According to India Spend, the proportion of single women, persons with disabilities and senior citizens who have received adequate rice, wheat and milk and egg, who received adequate these things is only 25 to 30%. Then according to India Spend, the proportion of single women, people with disabilities and senior citizens who had to borrow money or food is 40 to 50%. And the proportion of middle class moving to lower or poor class is 1/3. 33% of middle class became poor class. This is official figure. Next, please. What we need to do to improve the situation? I think what we need to do is not just give loans. What we've been doing is only giving loans, 20 lakh crore and this and that. I don't want to go into the economics, but who will take the loan? Today, I'm not sure about my job. Many people are sort of cannot meet both ends meet, and therefore are spending money out of their fixed deposits or maybe borrowing money, and they're indebted. The indebtedness has increased enormously. In that situation, if somebody comes to you and says, even white collar jobs are lost in crores, by the way, and somebody says, no, take 50 lakh rupee loan and buy a car. Will somebody buy a car or even a refrigerator or TV, new TV or whatever? Today, when people are not sure of tomorrow, they don't spend. Similarly, if there is no demand of goods, why should industrialists or corporates invest in new factories? The current, what we call the utilization rate of the current factories and machinery is only 70%. So 30% is lying idle because they have goods which are not sold. As you know, not just property, each one must be getting 3 advertisements every day. There's a flat there and flat there, etc. Or even hundreds of other things. But the goods are just lying idle and nobody is ready to buy. If demand is not there, why should industries also start new factories or maybe increase workforce and produce more, because the production already existing is not being sold. So basically, allowing or offering loans is not a solution, which is what we did in the last 2-3 kind of schemes or whatever. What we need to do is the government should spend money at this juncture, and that has to do with fiscal deficit, which I won't talk about because it will take a long time. But spend money at this juncture, and so that the money is actually in the hands of the poorer people. Normally, the poorer people, when they get money, spend that money. It's called as marginal propensity to spend. There are two things. One is out of 100 rupees, if you get, how much do you spend and how much do you save? There are two ways you can do. So that's called the marginal propensity to save and marginal propensity to spend. So basically, for poorer class, they tend to spend more than the rich class. How many toothpastes and how many cars and how many, if you give additional 100 rupees, they might put it in the share market, but they're not going to spend in buying things. So you must put that money in the hands of the poor. And this is what, in fact, Keynes had said many years ago, in fact, almost a century ago, that government should spend, and government should spend in such a fashion that the money is in the hands of the poor people. And those poor people will go in the market, they can buy things, thereby increasing the demand. When the demand increases, then the corporates will actually say, okay, now the goods are being sold, so they'll start producing more. Then they start employing more. Then the purchasing power of people increases, and then they go to the market and spend more. And then the corporates again, maybe open new factories, employ more, and then produce more, and then and so on and so forth. Now, Keynes' theory says that when that happens, then government's revenues of taxes also will eventually increase, and they can then, compensate for the money spent, which is essentially says that a fiscal deficit will no longer bother them because their income will increase. But that's a separate issue. The entire relationship between fiscal deficit and inflation and its relationship with share prices and how the rating agencies view it and how the IMF, World Bank views it is another topic, and we won't have time to discuss all that. But I think the whole point is that whatever happens at this juncture, the situation is so bad that government must spend huge money. And where should it spend? And I've given some areas. It can make Manrega days 100 to 200 days. Today, it is only 100 days. By the way, the actual days that people get is only 50. Statistically, people have found out that the actually people get only 50 days out of 365 days. You can imagine the kind of money that they must. That's the reason why the average income is only 8,300 rupees per family in India. It's a terrible thing. And 75% have less than 5,000 rupees for a family of 5 people. Imagine for a month, 1,000 rupees per head. There is food, shelter, education, healthcare, travel, entertainment, communication, mobile, whatever. I mean, we're reaching an impossible situation. So we must spend money and give it in the hands of people. People are in fact saying that they should just transfer, direct bank transfer, DBT it is called. Just transfer the money to the poor, let them spend. But I would say, okay, that's the last step, and even printing money and so on. But I think more importantly, you make Manrega days 100 to 200. Then you should start Manrega even in cities. There are lots of things that waste management to many things that you need to do about for cities. So today Manrega is not applicable for cities. So allow Manrega for cities also. Then expenditure for Manrega to be increased from 70,000 crore to 3 lakh crores, so that this whole in today the enormous amount of crisis that we have, we we pass through that in a better fashion. Then impose a minimum wage on everyone. That this is the minimum wage that you need to give him or her. The money should be used to work on various projects such as drought relief, irrigation, small scale industries, healthcare reform, education, roads, water, electricity, affordable housing, public transportation, renewable energy, etc. So government should spend a huge amount of money on these through Manrega or any other scheme. So it should increase that money from 70,000 crore to 3 lakh crore, but then spend it on what? So it should spend it on the things that I have told you. That is drought relief. This is what will improve the actual situation. We are not doing that. So the next year the roads are same as like what we see in Bombay or any other place. The roads are same as last year. The water situation is the same. Electricity, it's marginally improves, but I mean there's hardly any improvement. Healthcare, in terms of the real healthcare, leave alone the 5-star hospitals. I mean that's a separate issue. But for common people, the healthcare is a terrible thing. Education is terrible. Small scale industries are battered, smashed. Irrigation is not proper. So therefore, if there's a drought, we have to depend upon the rains. If there is sometimes there's no rain, and sometimes there is, it pours, and then there's a cloud burst, and then hundreds of things happen, and then it's a very difficult kind of situation. So use that money and use that manpower right now, so that like Pani Foundation does, you can store water so that the next year you don't need to go through droughts and things like that. So I think it requires meticulous planning as to where the money should be spent, areas, and what money should be needed, and spend it in such a fashion in villages and cities, and so that the money is transferred through work, not just through doles, but through work to the people who need it the most. But while doing that, they create huge amount of assets which are useful for the economy in years to come. So if this is done, now the questions are asked, where's the money going to come from? I mean, there are many things. You can get it from RBI, you can raise money from bonds. In the last term, you can print money or whatever. There are many ways, and I think that has a lot to do with fiscal deficit and inflation and so on. And I think that's a longest separate discussion, which I'll probably keep it some other time. You may have to call me again, I guess. But I think the important thing is that there are two sections that I want to talk about. One is what I think is a good model for the government. It is not just GDP rate and how many highways and how many bullet trains and how many planes and whatever. I mean, our whole kind of measure, and that impression is created by our TV media in our minds as to what progress is. To me, that is complete nonsense. To me, progress means it actually should reach the lowermost people. And that person is suffering enormously. It's not just the farmers, it's also the workers, it's also middle class today. Even IT people, there are hundreds, thousands I know who are jobless today, and the jobs are changing very fast because of AI and technology, and they don't know how to cope with this. There's a huge amount of mental stress. It's likely to be 25% by 2025. 25% will have some mental issues or not. So I can just go on and on. I think the point I'm trying to make is, I don't want to portray a bleak picture. I think if we think properly, if we think this is a problem, this is an issue, this is a challenge, and we need to improve, if we think that, then we will come out with solutions, and that is being positive. If we deny the problem and just show malls and just show, so the reason is that all the journalists, all the TV channel editors, and most of the social media people who keep on sending messages come from middle or higher middle class, whose aspirations are 2 BHK, 3 BHK row house, going to America, L1, B1, H1, this car, that car, and so on. And therefore, you see the advertisements of only consumerist goods of TV, fridge, cars, and the attraction of foreign universities and so on. All the TV channels don't tell you what I have told you. These are all official figures. I've been to villages and I've been to several areas and I know what pain means. But that's a personal experience. I don't want to share that with you. These are the numbers which can speak for themselves. I think it's up to us to define what progress is. And I have defined it for myself. I think progress means, to repeat, it should reach the lowermost strata of society, and health, education, roads, electricity, water, employment, low cost housing and public transportation for all. If that is the aim with which we work doggedly for the next 20 years, spend huge amount of money on healthcare education, we spend ridiculously low, 1/3 of what we need to spend, as I have shown you, and improve it, the whole thing, with a mission-like thing, and create a healthy, educated, not just working class, but human beings. We will create not just sort of give a tough competition to China, but also Europe, America. We'll create patents, we'll create research, we'll create everything. But for that, we need a social capital. We can't just have, the middle class and higher middle class looking at where's the next chance that I can go to America, or maybe be here and keep coding for some American European company. I think this is not what I call as progress, and I have defined what the progress means for me. Whether you agree with me or not, I leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Achyut sir, for an enlightening session. So now we will begin with the question and answer round.
Right.
So the first question we have is, what measures do you suggest for the improvement of social infrastructure in India, taking into consideration the mindset of the consecutive governments and also the financial crunch due to the current pandemic?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The answer to that is as follows. Uh, First of all, this is nothing to do with this government or that government. I think it's a question of system, because all governments starting from 1991 onwards have contributed to this. So uh, this is not something that only BJP has done or Congress has done or whatever. I mean, I think it's a problem of a system. So what we need to do, regardless of what political system you come from, what we need to do is all individuals, all of us, should strive for a democratic, peaceful change in the system, which spends huge amount of money on education, healthcare for all the people. There's public spending. See, there is a what we do is we have a NGO kind of mentality. We must get rid of this. What is NGO type of mentality? We need to spend 5% of our uh, money, 5% of GDP on healthcare. At least 3%, at least 3, and we spend 0.9 to 1.2%. So it's a question of billions of dollars. I mean, billions of dollars. It's not a question of a few hundred or $1,000, a lakh of dollars. Billions of dollars. If you want to create a good, really solid healthcare infrastructure and education infrastructure, it's a question of billions of dollars, and therefore it has to be done by only governments. And that's what Vietnam did, China did, Hong Kong did, Singapore did, South Korea did, Japan did. I've been repeating this. What we do is the government does not do it, but then some NGO starts a school in some Adivasi area, and then it says free education for, let's say, 100 Adivasis, whatever. And we middle class start, praising that NGO, and we say, oh, that is a fantastic model. How, selfless, these people are. How great these people are. Social service. And then we start donating them. We give them Padma Puraskar. We call them as chief guests. Now, you may do that. I mean, the people who had a good career option actually gave that up and started that school in the Adivasi areas, which is a good thing, which is praiseworthy, and we must praise them. But that cannot be treated as a model for the economic development of India. Unfortunately, middle class starts doing that, and government wants it, whichever government. They want middle class to actually use that as a model. They feel, oh, if there are 100 such selfless people, then we can change our country, which is complete nonsense, because no other country, including Far Eastern countries or Europe, America has changed because of these 100 NGOs or something like that. This is a complete eyewash that is sold to us. by these TV channels who then bring them up and take their interviews, and they publish their books and success stories. And so we are indirectly told that this is the model that we need to follow. I think we all need to stand up and spread this message that peacefully, democratically, we will keep on suggesting, impressing on you to spend far more money on education, public healthcare, and public, roads, not just eight lane highways, right? Good roads and electricity and water for all villages, 24 hours. I don't understand how you can have. See, I don't believe in equality the way communists believe, that same people should have same salary and same. This is nonsense. I have no problems in have somebody having one room kitchen, somebody having a bungalow, somebody having a scooter, and somebody having a Mercedes. I have no problems with that. But you cannot have 30, 40 crore people sleeping hungry every day. I mean, this is impossible. Why can't we just sort of start, get restless about it? I can't understand. This is not the country that we want. This is not humanity. So what I feel is that we all should strive that this is the basic minimum. If somebody, is actually studies in luxurious apartments, and 30-40% of the people have to study with lanterns. In fact, there are some people who study near fireworks at uh, uh, the Smashan Bhumi. I mean, there are a few people. In fact, the whole film called Masan was based on that. I mean, there are people who actually are forced to study when there are uh, uh, the pyre of the dead bodies. So basically, the issue is there should be equal opportunity at least. I have no problems if there's equal opportunity. There's electricity at home. There is a small house. There is uh, water which is clean. There's public transportation. After that, two people compete, and one person goes ahead, and that person earns more. I have no issues with that. But today, the whole competition is unequal, and we live with it. We think this is natural. I think this is completely unacceptable to me. So our insistence should be to spend more on the social infrastructure. Period. Now, as far as COVID is concerned, I believe that right now there's a huge crisis in unemployment and hunger. As I've said, I believe around 100 crore people must be just about living. That's why I'm suggesting the first step is for the government to spend huge amount of money, use Manrega or any other scheme that you can think about, and do the following, so that money also is given to those people. They can survive better, but they can also create demand in the economy, and thereby the economy also can come up. So this is the program for the next year, 2 year, whatever, and then you can start thinking about how you can mop up the resources and spend on education, healthcare, etc., so that you can improve the entire infrastructure for in the next 10, 20 years, etc. I mean, I think I'm not saying I have a full solution or a full roadmap, etc., but I'm just saying what my ideas are, and I think that's very important.
Yes, sir. Uh, yes, sir. I would request Yogesh, sir, to put forth his question.
Thanks, Raji. Raji, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Uh, Godbole sir, first of all, thank you very much for carrying the mirror and being the skeptic about this whole India being a superpower mirage, and redefining what positivity means and going beyond this whole $1 trillion GDP propaganda. And it was a pleasure listening to you, especially today on this auspicious day of Guru Purnima. So thank you for opening our mind towards a new direction. My question is as follows. So you will agree that most of the media and academic also propagates this India is on its way to being a
Yeah, yeah,
superpower, and as you said,
yeah,
more malls and consumer goods narrative.
yeah.
So how should we deal with this, at least in academics, and create more people who question this and adopt the definition of positivity as proposed by you? So maybe you can say some books. Obviously, you spoke about Joseph Stiglitz's book and that. So what should we incorporate in, say, academic course of economics or management to
No, I think
make more people.
your question is extremely correct and good, and I really don't have a very easy answer to that, because the entire media and everything is controlled by big corporates, and they want to sell their goods. So that's why you see they don't want the story that I've told you. They don't want you to hear that story. So, and that's why very few newspapers and very few TV channels will carry those. See, the point is, if you just keep on cursing the country without thinking about what should be done, then it's negative. I understand. But what I'm saying is that there's a way out. Like what I said in the end, that during COVID, what is the first thing that you should do in the next 20 years? How you should build your social infrastructure? Why is it important? I mean, I'm saying this that we should, really pass on the benefits to the lowermost strata. It's not only because of humanity. It's also humanity is very important factor, but it's also because of economics, by the way, because the entire even economic growth will not be sustainable if only top 5-10% get the benefit of it. You will undoubtedly enter into an area of crisis, because if the inequality increases enormously, by the way, then only a few people have huge wealth and the rest don't have that much wealth to consume all the goods that are produced, and that gives rise to what we call as a crisis. And so I'm not saying that we should certainly have that good trickle down, that is, make sure that the benefits are passed on to the lowest strata, but it also makes an economic sense. So it is very important, and that's why I must tell you that when inequality increased enormously, questions like people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett went to the American presidents and said that please increase our wealth tax. They themselves said that, where they could see that if the whole thing increases beyond a certain limit, there will be a crisis, which happened, by the way, in 2008 and in America. And today, even today, America has not come out of the crisis, including Japan. Japan is obviously the worst. I mean, there are negative interest rates in Japan, as you know. So you can take, if I ask for a loan, I can ask, I take the loan and then I get paid for taking a loan. I mean, that's a ridiculous kind of, it's that bad. But we need not go into that. The question is that it is out of humanity as well as economic sense that we need this kind of model. Okay, so that's one. Now what should we do? Now I know we're up against enormous amount of strong corporates and strong media. So my thing is, I will keep on spreading this message on whichever platform I get chance to, whether it is written articles or books. I've written a book in Marathi called Anartha. I don't know how many people of you know or read Marathi, but I would strongly recommend you to read Anartha. My book, latest means 2019 book. It gives a huge amount of statistics, data, and arguments. Please read it. Anarth. It's in Marathi, unfortunately, not translated yet in English. But I keep writing, I keep talking, and that's the best we can do, and create a democratic kind of value system where we start caring for our own. I mean, that is what nationalism is all about. It's not boundaries, it's people. If you care for people, if you love your people, if you think your people are important and they should at least get the basic minimum, that's what, in my opinion, is nationalism, patriotism, whatever you may call. So I believe that's the first thing that we should start thinking about. And I know it's difficult because that's not what the media wants to show you. I mean,
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. So I would like to take one last question.
yeah.
Uh, is privatization the future of India, sir?
No, I don't think so. I mean, my opinion is simple. I don't think privatization, government should enter into manufacturing goods. I mean, if government starts manufacturing soaps and furniture and cars, etc., I don't think that is correct. The communist countries tried to do that and they failed. But services should be government controlled, because you cannot. For instance, I mean, I'm against the privatization of railways and banks and several other things. After the privatization of banks, the small farmers and small scale industries, they it's not easy for them to get loans, for instance. In Anartha I have discussed and described that the branches number of branches of even public sector banks started winding up from villages and came to cities because as I've said, because of globalization, middle class had been created, and middle class wanted loans for their cars and for the houses and for the TVs and PCs and so on, and therefore they needed several branches of those banks in cities, and therefore several branches actually packed up from the villages and actually came to cities, and I have the numbers given there. So then the farmers were left high and dry, or even the workers and the slum dwellers in cities were left high and dry. So I think it is very important for us to see. Ultimately, it all depends upon your viewpoint. Is your viewpoint only GDP growth, only for 5-10%, and production of whatever? I mean, GDP consists of military goods, also consists of all cosmetics, also fast food, also I mean hundreds of things. So, or cars, and or do you think your progress means progress for all, and if that is your criteria, then you'll view everything differently. But I don't think government should meddle in areas such as manufacture of cars and food and several other things. But it should not, all that should be left to private companies, by the way, and it should encourage it. But services, by all means, the government should do it and make sure that the last person also can avail of those services. That's my personal opinion. I think we should stop. It's rather long. So
Yes, sir. So now I would like to ask my friend Kajal to take over.
Thank you so much, sir. What a session that was to show us a different perspective of our economy. Thank you so much, our honorable guest speaker, Shri Achyut Godbole, sir, to take out time from your busy schedule to grace the event. Thank you for inspiring and encouraging us with your words on this special day. We extend our gratitude to the management of Shri Vile Pale Kelvani Mandal for their constant support and student enrichment, and also for providing us the online platform of MS Teams. The event wouldn't have been possible without the support of RUSA. We also offer our thanks for their support. We would like to thank our respected Principal Ma'am, Dr. Krutika Desai Ma'am, Vice Principal Dr. Anjali Patkar Ma'am, and Nodal Officer Dr. Nupur Marotra Ma'am for their constant support in overcoming the hurdles and making this webinar a grand success. I must thank the entire organizing committee, volunteers, who have been working hard for the past couple of days to make this webinar a great success. And last but not the least, the lovely audience who have joined us today. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. And I would like to mention that the attendance link would be present on your class group, so kindly fill it. Now I would request everybody to stand at their respective places for the national anthem. Thank you.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you all.